Hey there, welcome to episode 109 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. Today we are recording at 9:42 a.m., give or take. That's overly precise, I think, on March 28th. It's a Friday. Happy Friday. Whenever you're listening to this, it should always be Friday. Season 2, episode 109 already. Wow, time is flying. Today we're going to talk about cross-pollination and what that means, what it implies for our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, the greater Vegas area. Actually, it doesn't even have to include, or it doesn't have to be limited to the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. It should indeed cover the entire greater Vegas area and beyond. You could be in Vegas anywhere on the planet when you think about it. If you are new to the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program, let me tell you, the name comes from three different things that taste great together. Cafe with two F's from the Cafe Centro, a small coffee shop, which is unfortunately no longer operating. It's no longer in business. Formerly located in the South Park region of San Francisco, a nice little park, literally. Park benches, grass, trees, the whole nine. Cafe Centro was where startups start, famously where Jack Dorsey was seen working on Twitter on his laptop, although it's entirely possible that the real co-founders of Twitter were nearby, a little bit further south on the peninsula. Either way, the story is probably more interesting than the truth. So Jack Dorsey and the other guy who helped to co-found it or finance it or whatever. I got to be honest, I don't really care about Twitter so much. But Cafe Centro itself was very cool. I had been there several times. A nice spot. It's too bad it's no longer in business, but an homage to Cafe Centro with Cafe Genius. Genius comes from the Genius lunches we used to have here in the greater Vegas area during the downtown project days. It was a great opportunity to catch up with random people working on random things, see what was going on, what's up, what's down, etc., etc. Plus, genius. And impresarios are people who are doing cool things. Impresarios indeed spelled with two S's, an uncommon but nonetheless correct spelling. I think it probably implies musical genius, but that's okay. Anybody doing cool stuff is an impresario here. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes and a bevy this week of links related to this episode. They are all Wikipedia links, in addition to the 3 shameless self-promotion links always present in each episode. I'll read the summary. We'll run through the links. This time I'll try to keep it quick because there are 7 Wikipedia links and 3 shameless self-promotion links. That's 10 links. That's like a whole episode right there. So let's get it started so we can get it finished. Summary: we can talk about flowers, but really we are talking about groups of people within an ecosystem engaging with each other. We speak of cross-pollination, that is, learning from each other and probably benefiting from each other through these interactions. It is something that probably happens a lot and could always happen more, and our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem should make this an actual objective to enable and encourage ... And so, of course, we're referring again to the title of today's episode, cross-pollination. It's not just for flowers anymore. The links for today's episode, the host links, that's me, shameless self-promotion in the form of a buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo link to the profile, which contains some biographical, some links to various audio programs, including the newly added but still up and coming Hugo Floss program, episode 0, published several days ago, sometime last week. No, sometime on the weekend, I think. And you will find links to not only the other audio programs, but to projects on which I am working and some affiliate links and some other stuff. So just a place to connect with some of that stuff. If you're curious or interested, you do not have to spend money at any of these shameless self-promotion sites or links or anything like that. If you don't want to, you can if you want to. Always appreciated. All proceeds go towards coffee or coffee accessories. That's what powers all this. Buy me, the second link I've recently added. So it used to be 2, now it's 3, but it is another buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. Posts, Posts. That is where you will find the exclusive to Buy Me a Coffee platform, the weekly Monday Buy Me an Update microcast, 5 minutes or less, a quick rundown on the previous week's audio programs, like just a quick one-liner, and then any announcements are upcoming for the week that follows. So check that out, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. There are also links on the profile page for that. And ko-fi, 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 probably more frequently a dash, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. The dash key, it's next to the 0 on your normal, pretty standard QWERTY keyboard. It might be somewhere else, but it's probably, it's up there somewhere. Ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo does not allow audio hosting as Buy Me a Coffee does, but I do post on ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo also with some textual updates. I gotta up my game with audience engagement, especially with Hugo Floss coming along. We'll see where that actually ends up. And now onto the links. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the titles of these links. They're all Wikipedia links, and they're not all essential, but I wanted to give sort of an overview of the different facets of an ecosystem. So the first link, ecosystem, is about biological ecosystems. And then we have entrepreneurship ecosystem, startup ecosystem, social innovation, which is kind of a different take on an ecosystem, so how people are interacting. Innovation system, which is how you can prompt an innovation culture, I suppose you could say. I've mentioned that before. Maybe cultivate it in a region, something I've definitely mentioned before. The human ecosystem, which is a sort of a more specific version of the general biological ecosystem, so how humans interact with the resources around them and the other humans around them. And finally, Conway's Law, that's sort of interconnective tissue. So Conway's Law, very briefly, you can and should check out the Wikipedia page, is the notion or the supposition, the assertion that we design our systems to mirror our social interactions, our social structure. So we design websites or directory services or things like this that mirror our organization. So we might have the accounting part of our website or a part of a directory, or we might have the HR and the engineering and the sales. So the groups and the people are sort of split up, and they're managed in these groups, and goals and evaluation and judgment are conducted along these dividing lines, these organizational divides. And then our systems, including all those things, so the assessments and the evaluations and the communications and the management and so on, get mirrored into the tooling and the platforms and the way we engage across localities and so on. So I'm probably doing it a disservice. I'm just kind of rambling a little bit about what Conway's Law is. Definitely worth checking out if you ever want to understand why your tools that you're using in your small company don't seem to make sense, because they're trying to mirror the way humans interact. And if your humans are not interacting well, the systems will probably not help. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later, slightly related, although actually it's the inverted version of Conway's Law that I'm going to bring up today. But I have often said, if you use systems that are influenced or are built around Conway's Law, if you use these systems as a way to connect people, you will almost certainly end up dividing people into groups, and then they will connect, or maybe they won't. But you won't encourage cross-pollination necessarily. It's not an automatic byproduct of using insular platforms or platforms that sort of naturally break people up into groups that are aligned with social constructs. So you kind of drive it in the wrong direction. That's my assertion, and I think it's borne out in the way the world works. So entrepreneurship ecosystem, startup ecosystem, social innovation, innovation system, human ecosystem, these are all sort of different facets, again, of the ecosystem notion. And many people will talk about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and I choose to expand that a little bit, the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. It's a fun thing to say, and it sounds like once you say that, you're done. Oh, okay, we have one, we're good. But in fact, it needs a little bit more effort than that, and it needs a little bit more attention. And I think the presumption that we have one and we're good is not necessarily a healthy view, but that's maybe for another time. Today we're going to talk about cross-pollination. So our insular groups, let's start there. I have spoken of this previously more than once, that the Greater Vegas area, our entrepreneurial ecosystem without the innovation, the thing that people talk about is made up of groups, whether geographically formed, like neighborhoods, or interest-based, like meetup groups on that awful meetup website, or Facebook groups, or LinkedIn groups, or any number of online silos. So the entrepreneur, and by extension, the human ecosystem, right? Just the way a city functions, the social interactions, and so on. So entrepreneurial ecosystem is kind of a subset or a subgrouping of that. I reflexively refer to that, but the human ecosystem or the social ecosystem, the innovation system that is within the ecosystem, normal people who are not entrepreneurs can certainly be innovative. It's where creative ideas come from to solve problems. Maybe a neighborhood has something like, oh, if only we could figure out a way to solve the pothole problem or something. And somebody will come up with an idea, and that's sometimes how innovation works. For better or worse, it is too easy for groups built around physical proximity or specific interests to become insular. On the one hand, it is actually good to maintain focus on the particular commonality. So that's the good half, maybe half. But without some outreach or engagement beyond a particular group, it is a bit too easy to become insular, to overfocus on issues of interest to the group without reaching out for diverse opinions and any possibilities of collaboration or other interactions that may actually be mutually beneficial. Like, we're good, we don't need to talk to other people. That rarely turns out to be a positive or really a good or true notion. As online tools are used more often with business models that benefit from retaining their users, the use of tools like these to manage groups, to manage engagement within each group and coordinate activities within the group, we end up with insular groups automatically, kind of by design. That is, if we believe what Mel Conway has to say and we flip the logic, we may end up with social interactions in person, in real life, that mirror our tools used to manage them. A Facebook group and a LinkedIn group may have the same interests and goals, so the group of people that are participating, but they may not know about each other because of the platform gap. LinkedIn is not necessarily saying, oh, by the way, you should check out this Facebook group. It seems like it'd be similar, and vice versa. If they find each other, it will likely be the result of one or more people joining both and then mentioning the existence of one to the other, one group, or mentioning to group members, hey, do you know so-and-so? I totally misspelled, or I said existing instead of existence. So we fix that. There's always errors. That's why reading through this is so useful. So once this happens, once you say, hey, did you know there's a LinkedIn group, Facebook people, then you get some cross-pollination, or at least potential. So we should be prompting cross-pollination, perhaps. Whenever one person becomes involved with multiple groups, there is always a possibility that these multiple groups will begin to intermingle. It just takes one. It may be common goals or interests, or it may be individuals that seem to have commonalities between them that will be discovered through this human connection. So one person, like I consider myself a connector, I've been called as such. If I meet someone who I think, you know what, you should meet this other person in this other group, they may never have encountered each other but for this happenstance. And so cross-pollination may begin. It is possible, of course, to use digital tools to prompt these interactions. The algorithm, the mysterious algorithm, the notion that has taken over the world, is essentially connecting you with things, whether they are podcasts, video streams, products or services, a new friend suggestion, whatever the case, anything that makes the algorithm owner money. So if there's some way to profit from you clicking on something, they're going to do it. YouTube recommended videos. Are they doing it for your health? No, they're trying to make more money. Often based on programmatic understanding of what is appealing to you and what might be appealing about these things. So try to put you together. It's matchmaking 101. Based in most cases, in part at least, on other human interactions with these other things. So basically saying, oh, okay, these people like these things and you seem to be similar to these people. So maybe you'll like these other things that they like. That's a gross oversimplification. There might be some other subtleties, but that's the basic idea. The dark art of recommendation is usually a closely guarded secret, like TikTok, for example. But there are visible variations on this theme. You can find open source and examples and research papers about recommendation engines and so on. When you really think about it, we all do something similar all the time. We're always thinking about recommending, oh, you should try this restaurant. You should try this car. You should read this book. Any sort of review, recommendation, anything where you express an opinion on something based on your personal experience. These are all kind of human nature, I think. If our groups are organized primarily on proprietary platforms, though, so Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, etc., they may be discouraged from discovering each other. So does TikTok recommend you check out an Instagram reel? So, you should follow this person and become a part of that little micro community of followers that are interested in the thing. In much the same way a casino discourages its visitors from leaving to spend their time and money elsewhere. They want you to stay inside. This business decision makes some sense. It's totally reasonable. You're a capitalist entity. You want to make profits, grow your company, pay the CEO a big salary, etc. But as a human decision, it may actually detract from the value potential of the groups of people with these common interests. They may never see each other for your profit, which is unfortunate. We can see this in any case where, for example, one person feels they must continue to use Facebook because their family or friends or some other groups will not stop using Facebook to organize, communicate, and generally maintain the group connections. Hey, why are you still using Facebook? Oh, my whole family uses it. That's how I stay in touch with them. Okay, that's unfortunate. It's the way of the world, though, unfortunately. So why should you be proactive about all this then? Left to its own devices, an ecosystem will eventually bring some insular groups together. That's sort of the random chance of the world. This may be in the real world, in person, through happenstance or actual proaction. So in the real world, people might just bump into each other, or someone might do what connectors do, which I'm about to say, getting a little ahead of myself. I'll just say that one person who is in multiple groups, who realizes and acts on the synergies that seem to exist between the groups or individuals within them. That's what we're talking about. These people are sometimes called connectors, or if they are really, really proactive, super connectors. And by the way, I'll interrupt myself here quickly. I would characterize a super connector as someone who goes out of their way to connect people without they don't get anything from it, at least anything in the direct near term. Like, you and this other person should meet, and you give each other contact information. You do a quick little, here's why I think you should meet. And then you're like, and then you don't have to copy me. You don't have to discuss, I am not responsible for what happens next. I don't stand to gain anything. I just think there would be value in the two of you meeting. Maybe somewhere down the road, there'll be some sort of, huge discovery or some giant benefit that everybody it's a good thing these two people met. But generally speaking, connectors are people who just introduce people, who spread the word, who you retweet things. You say, hey, I'm going to this event. If check it out. But super connectors, here's this event that I'm not attending, but you could, etc. So super connectors may be out of the flow, but still take that proaction. They tend to be the enzyme that adds to the health of the larger ecosystem by making these efforts to encourage cross-pollination. Not every effort yields some great interconnect across silos, by the way, but the effort is what counts. So people, you try 100 introductions and 10 may be fruitful and one may lead to the world changing for the better, or two of them might be changing it for the worse. Who knows? The same can occur between online groups, especially across those different and not necessarily interoperating platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Discord, Meetup, Eventbrite, I don't even know. The list goes on, where the discovery and connection occur thanks to a proactive individual, one of those connectors who makes the effort to proactively engage between disparate groups so that they might actually connect or at least discover each other. And then they can take it from there. That nature takes its course, as they say. It is the proaction of the smaller population of connector personalities that can enable that discovery, at least. And those initial introductions can lead to cross-pollination. Again, not every introduction will be fruitful. Not the introduction, but the introduction enables connection. At which point any relationships that form and sustain can take their course. And by the way, if you're the connector, might introduce two people and they may say, oh yeah, oh, do you know? So, oh, you should actually meet this other person. So you can kick off a chain of introductions. Who can say? It's the fact that these two people that you connected, two or more, who knows? Once they interact, the potential builds from there, maybe on its own. So without the connections, we miss out on valuable and fruitful, other valuable and fruitful connections. So that is, if you don't kick off that first introduction, they may never have met the other people that they each know, and so on and so on. So you become a catalyst or an enzyme to lower the bar of people, the potential for people to interact by starting with an introduction. There are different scenes in the Greater Vegas area, for better or worse. There is some focus on the Greater Vegas area on a tech scene and on a startup scene. Maybe they're the same thing, who knows? And maybe the combination of both into one larger group. Hey, I just said that. There is nothing wrong with this. So I'm not a detractor from the notion of these, on the surface anyway, but there is always the possibility that messaging will prevent someone from looking in on what goes on here in one of those scenes or the big super scene at meetups or other contexts if they feel they are not pursuing a startup or doing something in tech. So tech scene, well, I'm not like making an app, or I don't have a startup that's the next Google. So maybe that's not for me. But indeed, those may be, there may be some actual, real, very useful alignment. So it turns out, as I'm about to say, there are other groups around interests and goals, of course, not always referred to as scenes. And there is always the possibility that one might find some possibility in becoming a part of a new scene or group or community or whatever the word that fits might be. Half the challenge, give or take, is knowing these groups or scenes exist unless they get hyped in one way or another, maybe inappropriately. Those within know all about what they're up to. If you're in the startup scene, you know, maybe, kind of what's going on. But others may not, without random chance or one of those connector types getting involved. So this is where I'm going to address what I was saying earlier about someone who might not know that they actually could benefit. So if we take the so-called tech scene as an example, there are some whom I have actually spoken with who consider themselves a part of the tech scene because they use technology in some way in their pursuits. We're seeing this more now with AI tools. I don't have to be a programmer. I can just use AI. That will be a learning lesson for later. This is a good way of viewing the use of a label on a tech scene. Others take the label to mean a focus on tech that is not a focus on how they use tech, probably aimed at startups making apps or whatever. Who creates these notes? I don't know. I'll fire this guy. So aimed at startups, maybe that's the initial thinking, and that's what I have heard from people. I've actually asked them, and they tell me these things. This is a good way of viewing that label, though. So you've put a label on something, and then other people take it seriously. Other people are a little bit more adventurous, perhaps, like, I'm going to go anyway. And then they discover that, this is actually appropriate for people that are just tech adjacent. So if people are put off, though, if they take a label too seriously, if you call it I will say on Meetup, there are groups that are called like women who read books. And if you look at the attendance list, there are people that may or may not be women, or whatever that really means. So to label it a certain way, you may be directing people away without that intention. It's hard to say. Maybe it's explicitly, or maybe it's an implicitly constrained group. Who knows? So people may be inclined not to explore what the tech scene, again, is about. Anytime there's a group or community or scene that adopts a label, there is a chance that the label will be taken literally, and some may miss out on participating or at least reaching out. This is not going to end civilization, and naming things, while one of those problems we all have to deal with, is not necessarily the immediately necessary solution to anything. So I'm not saying the tech scene should be called the let's include everybody because you're all welcome scene. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it is something to be aware of if cross-pollination is desirable. So tech scene, and then being a little bit more descriptive with some additional information about, hey, if you're tech adjacent, or that's up to you. If you're in a particular scene or group or community and you would like to be inviting rather than insular, and I don't mean isolated. I think insulation is more common and not always intended, but you just kind of tend to keep to yourselves. That's often why people form groups, but there's also some value in reaching out or discovering across the boundaries or the insulation of these groups. Not always. not going for rules or regulations here. We're talking just general. Is there value in reaching out beyond your usual, group of friends, group of collaborators, etc.? Almost always yes. So let's cross-pollinate. Crazy. As a bit of a personal challenge for yourself and for everybody, consider inviting a friend or a colleague, maybe a family member, to join in on something that you are involved with, whatever it is. Something that they may never have thought would be interesting to them. Maybe, introduce them to some new book club or meetup group in general. Like, I don't mean a small M meetup group, like we're going to talk about movies or board games or different kinds of coffee or how to build model airplanes or whatever it is, right? Like, invite them along. They might meet someone interesting, perhaps with some common interest that is completely outside of the group. Maybe it's not even involved with the scene that you're taking them to. You may take them to a tech gathering and they end up talking to somebody about books or knitting or cooking or hiking or biking or whatever it is. They may end up finding new people with new interests. They probably would not have encountered that person just because of the way the world works, right? So you've opened up new possibilities of interaction, maybe even collaboration. Who knows? The people you introduce might start the next killer startup. Who knows? Who can say? Relying on so that's in person. Relying on digital platforms with a profit motive especially may or may not be helpful. I mean, they're probably a little bit helpful. If Meetup or LinkedIn or ads on Instagram or Facebook are the way you find out what is going on in your locality, and by the way, I've mentioned this recently, I think it was last week, I discovered that there was a Ignite Talks event coming up at the end of April 30th, I think, because of a single ad placed on Instagram. I can find no other reference to this upcoming event anywhere. That's a choice. You might be in Greater Vegas somewhere or wherever you find yourself, and this applies to you wherever you are. That relying on digital platforms and ads and stuff, you may be left out. I will suggest that you are missing out on something. Hey, I just said that. And you may not even know until it's too late. This has happened to me many times. Oh, I wish I would have known about this before it took place yesterday. I would have gone, maybe. That's maybe one thing or maybe many things. It's hard to say, but I think you're missing out if you completely rely on disinterested third parties for your discovery. If you think that you're seeing everything on Instagram, you're probably wrong. Or maybe you're right, and that would be weird. If you don't mind a little bit of shameless self-promotion, a little bit more of sorts here at the end of the episode, I use that. That's like that word is carrying a lot there. We are adding a new initiative to the Innovate for Vegas Foundation catalog of initiatives, just in the blue sky ideation phases at the moment. But to build on top of a standards-based community calendar initiative in our Smart Social initiative, right? So one of the components is a smart calendar, which makes maximal use of CalDave and iCalendar. So it's generally standards compliant, interoperable with other calendaring tools and whatnot. It's not a one-off that, Meetup calendar. Can I use it with any standard calendar tools? No. You can add one Meetup to your calendar, but they've broken the whole notion of interoperability. That's and everybody does that, so I can't complain too much, but we're trying to do some cool stuff. So if we can build on top of our smart calendar component on the Smart Social initiative platform, we can make groups and communities, discovery and cross-pollination, something that can happen at city scale for quote unquote free, right? Which is really something that elevates the entire notion of a smarter smart city, if you ask me. So this should be, and this has come up before I've talked about this previously in the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem study that was performed some time ago. A community calendar is an important component of any healthy and eventually prosperous, strongly supportive, et cetera, valuable entrepreneurial ecosystem. I would say by extension, any human ecosystem, just knowing what's happening, what you can be a part of, and trying to match you with things that might be interesting, with other people who might be interesting, and so on. So implementing a kind of a grand unified meetup scheme, small m, that works in a region and is focused on the proclivities of the people in that region and the offerings of the region itself and so on. Interoperability between regions. Hey, I'm going to come and visit Vegas. That would be good. That's fine. We'll start local first and build up. But this sort of thing should be sort of par for the course. It shouldn't be left to chance that, oh, okay, we're going to use Meetup and Blue Sky. We're going to use Eventbrite and Twitter or X. We're going to use LinkedIn only. And if you're not following the right people on LinkedIn, you'll never know what's happening. So there are these limitations of these siloed platforms. And just like Mel Conway might tell you, that can lead to the siloing of the groups and communities in a larger, a greater Vegas or some other locality where people rely too much on those tools. They could, I'm not going to say should, but they could get out and about and meet people and cross-pollinate in real life. And if you take that to mean something more, that's up to you. But just generally interacting with people outside of your normal day-to-day, outside of your normal travels, outside of your particular interest groups. I will offer one example. Wednesday night, today's Friday morning. So Wednesday night this week, I attended an open mic. You get on a list and you can get up and you get 3 minutes to tell jokes or stories or be yourself on a stage at the Wise Guys Comedy Club in the downtown Vegas Arts District. I think there were 50 people. So you get 3 minutes each. It's a long evening, but it's free if you're on stage. It's $5 if you want to just watch. The upside though is you get there at 5:30, the show starts at 7. So you're kind of milling around, having some conversation and whatnot. You're meeting people who have this interest in getting up on a stage and talking to a crowd and so on, but they're all doing different things and they've come across different other locations and different events and different jobs that they have and so on. So you're getting outside of your normal usual interactions and meeting people with a kind of a hook, like, oh, you're here to do some open mic comedy. Me too. What do you do normally? And then there's some other story and so on. So these are the beginnings of, and hopefully I'm not telling you anything too crazy. You're not thinking, I never thought of that. But this happens anytime you can interact with people that you don't encounter regularly. And it's something that we could enable with tools and a culture, the tools that don't assume that you're going to be in silos. So hopefully make discovery a little bit easier and make cross-pollination more likely. But also a culture that says, rather than relying entirely on, I got to check my meetup groups, I'm going to just use LinkedIn, I'm just going to rely on an advertisement on Instagram, and that's where I'm going to discover what's going on. So a culture of individuals that decide that they would like to be more proactive and put these tools and technologies to use in conjunction with human nature, which is to be sociable. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. I got to get back to work. So thank you for listening as always. Make sure you get out and meet someone and introduce them to your friends, or don't. Up to you. Take care, and we'll catch up with you next week. Bye-bye.